What if Jesus wasn't the only one? What if the man we know as Christ didn't just appear once in history, fully formed and divine, but instead walked the earth many times, across centuries, cultures, and identities, each time refining his soul for a final mission? What if the figure we call the Son of God had once been Adam, the first man, then later Enoch, the mystic who walked with God, then Melchizedek, the eternal priest-king of Salem, Joseph, the dreamer of Egypt, even Zerubbabel, the rebuilder of the temple? And what if all of these weren't just foreshadowings of Jesus, but the same soul, incarnating again and again, learning, suffering, evolving? This isn't just wild speculation. These are the direct revelations of Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, one of the most mysterious and accurate mystics of the 20th century. Under deep hypnosis, Cayce gave thousands of spiritual readings, and among the most controversial were his insights into the soul of Jesus. Not as a single, untouchable deity, but as a soul on a long, purposeful journey, just like yours. In this video, we'll explore the hidden life of Jesus that the church never told you. We'll travel before Bethlehem, into ancient Egypt, across India and Persia, into the Great Pyramid itself, and we'll discover how Cayce's vision of Christ wasn't about blind worship, but about awakening the divine spark within you. Stay with us, especially for Part 4, because what Cayce says about Christ consciousness will challenge everything you thought you knew and might just awaken something ancient inside you. But before we dive in, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt that Jesus' story doesn't quite end where the Bible does? That there's more beneath the surface, something deeper, something lost? Comment your answer below. And if you believe spiritual truth should be explored, not censored, then like this video and subscribe. We're just getting started.
Long before Bethlehem, long before the manger, the wise men, or the star, there was a soul, a being of light who existed before time, before form, before the world even spun into motion. Edgar Cayce, in one of his most profound trance readings, number 574914, named this soul Amelius. According to Cayce, Amelius was the very first soul to fully embody the divine ideal. In the realm of pure spirit, what Cayce called the spirit plane, souls were created by God as extensions of divine thought, radiant and free. But over time, many of those souls became entangled in desire, caught in the illusion of separation. They forgot their source. They forgot who they were, but not Amelius. This soul saw what was happening and made a choice that would shape the destiny of humanity, to descend into matter, to voluntarily enter the cycles of earth, to lead others back home, not by force, but by example. Now, imagine that for a moment. A being of pure light, choosing to take on the heaviness of flesh, choosing to forget divine perfection for a time so that others might remember theirs. This isn't just poetic language. Cayce described this act as the beginning of what he called the pattern, a divine blueprint that the soul of Jesus would follow across many lifetimes. This idea might sound shocking, even blasphemous, but Cayce wasn't trying to undermine the sacred. He was trying to expand it. He wasn't saying Jesus was less than divine, but that he had earned that divinity through conscious alignment across time. And that begins with Amelius. It reframes everything. Jesus was not sent down once, fully formed and flawless. He began as Amelius and chose the long road, a road that starts not in a manger, but in eternity. And if that's true, then it leads us to a radical question. What if the soul of Christ wasn't a one-time miracle, but the first traveler on a path you and I were also meant to walk? Because in the next part, we'll trace how that soul, Amelius, returned again and again across centuries, from Adam to Melchizedek, from dreamers to temple builders, evolving toward the mission we know as Jesus of Nazareth. And once you see that pattern, you might just see yourself in it too.
If the soul known as Amelius began the divine descent into matter, then his journey didn't stop there. According to Edgar Cayce, that soul would walk the earth again and again, through time, through trials, through transformation. Each lifetime wasn't just a random experience. It was purposeful, designed, a sacred series of incarnations that slowly shaped the soul into what we would one day call Jesus. In reading 3647, Cayce makes a stunning claim that the soul of Jesus lived not just once, but many times before his final appearance in Galilee. Let's begin at the beginning, with Adam. Cayce says that Amelius entered the earth plane first as Adam, the first man, the one who fell. But the fall wasn't a moral failure, Cayce explained. It was the soul's first deep entanglement with material desire, the beginning of forgetting. Then came Enoch, the mystic who walked with God and was not. In this lifetime, the soul remembered more. He lived in communion with the divine. He became the bridge between heaven and earth. Next, the soul took on the form of Melchizedek, the priest-king of Salem. The Bible calls him without beginning or end, a being of mysterious origin. According to Cayce, this was no coincidence. This was the soul continuing its refinement, now balancing authority with spiritual purity. Then Joseph, the dream interpreter of Egypt, sold by his brothers but rising to power through wisdom and forgiveness. Here, the soul learned compassion in adversity, the ability to see God's hand in even the darkest betrayal. And finally, Zerubbabel, the rebuilder of the temple after exile, a man tasked with restoring the sacred in a world that had forgotten. Symbolically, this was the soul preparing to become the cornerstone of a new spiritual covenant. These weren't just biblical cameos. They were phases in a long, sacred evolution. Jesus, Cayce said, did not arrive perfect. He became, through suffering, through obedience, through lifetimes of spiritual alignment. As Hebrews 5:8 puts it, though he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. Cayce echoed this, not to diminish Jesus, but to deepen him, to show that his greatness was not a divine shortcut, but a soul-earned triumph. And that's what makes this story so powerful. Because if Jesus walked this long road of transformation, then maybe it means we're not here to be perfect either. Maybe we're here to remember and to become. And if that's true, if the Christ soul could take so many forms to grow toward the light, then where did he go next? In the next part, we'll follow that soul into the years that history forgot, the so-called missing years of Jesus. And what Cayce reveals will take us far beyond Galilee.
For centuries, people have wondered what happened to Jesus between the ages of 12 and 30. The Gospels fall silent during this time. No sermons, no miracles, no parables, just emptiness. A mysterious gap that theologians have long struggled to explain. But Edgar Cayce had an answer. In reading 5749-2, Cayce revealed that these were not lost years, but deeply sacred ones. Jesus, he said, was not idle. He was learning, training, traveling across ancient lands to prepare his soul for the mission ahead. According to Cayce, Jesus journeyed to Persia, India, and Egypt, each a cradle of ancient wisdom. In India, he studied the principles of reincarnation, karma, and union with the divine self. In Persia, he explored disciplines of meditation and mystical insight passed down through the Zoroastrian Magi. And in Egypt, he entered the sacred halls of the Great Pyramid of Giza, not as a tourist, but as a spiritual initiate. Cayce didn't describe these travels as theological rebellion, but as spiritual fulfillment. Jesus wasn't rejecting his Hebrew heritage, he was expanding it, absorbing universal truths to better reflect God's eternal message. One of the most compelling images Cayce painted is of Jesus undergoing ritual initiation within the pyramid, where sound, vibration, and sacred geometry were used to align the soul with higher consciousness. These weren't just ceremonies, they were activations, designed thousands of years earlier by ancient adepts who, Cayce claimed, foresaw the coming of the Messiah and encoded his awakening into the architecture itself. Jesus was also deeply influenced by the Essenes, a mystical Jewish sect known for their purity, silence, and preparation for the coming of divine light. According to Cayce's reading 1472-3, it was the Essenes who prepared Mary, his mother, from birth, and later guided Jesus through his early spiritual development. Together, these teachings, Indian, Persian, Egyptian, Essene, were not in conflict. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, a universal map of the soul's return to the divine. Jesus was not collecting exotic ideas for the sake of novelty. He was remembering, awakening, integrating truths that had once been one and would be again through him. So by the time he returned to Galilee, he wasn't just a carpenter's son. He was the embodiment of a new and yet ancient consciousness, the Christ, awakened. And in the next part, we'll explore exactly what that means, because Cayce says Jesus didn't just become the Christ for himself, but to show the rest of us what's possible when the soul aligns with God.
By the time Jesus returned from his hidden years of study, he wasn't just a man of knowledge, he was something more. He had become a living embodiment of what Edgar Cayce called the Christ consciousness. Not a title, not a status, but a state of divine awareness, a complete attunement to the presence of God within. According to Cayce, this wasn't something unique to Jesus. It was something available to every soul. In reading 2533:7, he wrote, "The Christ Spirit is universal and personal. It may be awakened in all." Let that sink in for a moment. This means that what Jesus became wasn't meant to remain exclusive. It was meant to serve as a pattern, a divine blueprint for how we might also remember who we are. In Cayce's view, Jesus didn't come to earth to show off miracles. He didn't come to demand worship. He came to demonstrate what life looks like when a soul lives in full alignment with divine will. His healings, his visions, his power over matter, these weren't magic tricks. They were the natural outflow of a consciousness free from fear, illusion, and separation. And this is where the story takes a turn, because it's no longer just about him. It's about you. Have you ever had a moment, even just a second, when you felt completely connected? When time disappeared, fear melted, and you felt still, whole. That was a glimpse of Christ consciousness, a reminder that the divine isn't something you chase. It's something already inside you, waiting to be remembered.
Jesus, Cayce said, was the first soul to complete the long cycle of incarnation and return to God in total unity. In reading 57:49-5, he wrote that Jesus remained so attuned to the divine purpose across every life that he became the pattern for man's return to the Creator. The pattern. That word appears again and again. It's not a ladder. It's not a doctrine. It's not even a religion. It's a path walked in humility, suffering, and love. A path that begins with remembering the divine spark within. So when Jesus said, "The things I do, you shall do also, and greater," he wasn't exaggerating. He was inviting. He was saying, follow this pattern, walk this road, not to become like him, but to become fully you, as you were created to be. And in the final part of this journey, we'll explore why this message, this invitation to awaken, was so dangerous to institutional religion, and why the real Jesus was far more revolutionary than many churches have dared to admit.
If everything Cayce said is true, if Jesus was a soul who evolved through lifetimes, studied across continents, awakened fully to God within, and then told us we could do the same, then it begs the question, why isn't this taught in church? Why would such a profound, empowering vision of Jesus be left out, or worse, silenced? Because this Jesus is dangerous, not to the soul, but to the system. Institutional religion has often been built not on awakening, but on obedience, not on inner discovery, but on external control. A Jesus who tells you the kingdom of God is within, who teaches that you can embody divine truth, leaves very little room for fear-based authority. And that's the heart of it. Cayce didn't condemn the church. He simply peeled back the centuries of doctrine and dogma that had buried the original message, that Jesus didn't come to be worshipped as an exception, but followed as an example. Because if every soul carries the potential to awaken the Christ within, then the walls between clergy and congregation begin to crumble. The gates that separate sacred from secular dissolve, and the power to connect with God no longer belongs to a chosen few. It belongs to everyone. And that's terrifying, not to God, but to institutions built on control. Cayce understood this. He knew that a message of soul-level transformation wouldn't be popular with power structures. A Jesus who offers freedom through consciousness rather than forgiveness through ritual changes everything. He wrote in reading 2067-7, Jesus became the Christ not by decree, but through many lifetimes of conscious choice and alignment. This wasn't a shortcut to salvation, it was a path. And if that's true, then it's open, not just to saints or scholars, but to you. The Jesus Cayce revealed wasn't a gatekeeper, he was a guide. He didn't say, worship me. He said, follow me. He didn't close a door, he opened one. And that door still stands open today. In the silence, in your suffering, in your longing to return to something sacred that the world has made you forget. So maybe the real question isn't, why did the church fear this Jesus? Maybe the question is, what would happen if you remembered him? What if Jesus was never meant to be placed on a pedestal, unreachable and distant, but rather held close as a mirror? What if his life was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a pattern? A divine blueprint, meant not just to be studied, but lived. Edgar Cayce didn't offer easy answers. He never asked us to abandon faith, but to go deeper. He never claimed to rewrite the gospel, but to read between the lines, to remember what the story of Jesus was always pointing toward, that you are not separate from the divine, that the same spark that lived in him lives in you. This is the heart of the Christ consciousness, not a dogma, not a religion, but a remembering, a waking up to the truth that has always been there, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the centuries of control. That truth is simple and powerful. You were created with purpose. You were born from light. And your soul's journey, no matter how messy, painful, or confusing, is not a mistake. It is the path. The same path he walked, the same one he opened. Cayce called Jesus our elder brother, the one who went first, not so we could worship him, but so we could walk behind him into our becoming. Because the door to divinity was never locked, it was forgotten. And now, it's time to remember. If something in you stirred during this video, don't ignore it. Sit with it, reflect, ask the deeper questions, and above all, keep walking.